Themes through time. Let's have a look at this new art project. I'll give you a bit of background about it and put it into context, let you know what it's based on. What we're looking at here are two pieces of art that explore the same theme, but not necessarily the same topic. The piece of art on the left is a painting from a few hundred years ago. The piece of art on the right is a photograph of the art. So the photo is not the art. It's just that that's a photo of the sculptures. That piece of art would be a combination of a sculpture or sculptures and an installation. An installation means an artist takes three-dimensional objects, could be a combination of 3D and 2D objects, but the objects are placed in some particular setting. Sometimes it's in a gallery space, but sometimes it's out in the community. As we see here, these ice sculptures were placed in a square in Germany. Now, in Europe, squares are popular. They're usually in an urban center, urban setting, urban location, meaning like downtown. And they're like big areas of open space surrounded by buildings. And typically in this open space, there could be like tables that the cafe patrons can use to sip their coffee or have lunch, or there could be fountains. And basically, it's just a big open area for people to walk and congregate. These steps are from a building that flanks this particular square in Germany. And the artist placed these ice sculptures on those steps for the public to see. The piece on the left is a painting depicting a common exploration hundreds of years ago, and it's still going on today, but maybe not as popular. It's the gold rush. So centuries ago, many men and women ventured up to the northern part of North America, Yukon, Alaska, Northwest Territories, in search of gold. So they would be looking for gold in the rivers that flow up there. Panning is the term, panning for gold. And that's what you see these four men doing in this particular painting. The sculptural piece on the right shows a whole bunch of people. Those are people forms. They're sitting. So when the artist sculpted them, she must have known that she would be placing them on steps like that. And they're made of ice, so they're melting. We'll come back to this. This project is based on this major learning outcome from our program of studies, the part in the black box. Recognize that while the sources of images are universal, the formation of an image is influenced by the artist's choice of medium, the time, and the culture. What does that mean? It means that throughout time, throughout the centuries, as long as humans have been walking on this earth and making art, they have explored the same common themes over and over again throughout the centuries, throughout the decades. But the way those artists explored those themes has always been influenced by many things, such as the time period, the technology available at the time, the location of the artist, like where they live, their demographic, their cultural and ethnic background, even like whether they're male or female, or if they're married or not married, or their relationships, their social status, their education, their life experiences. And then not to mention, their preferences with artistic methods and materials, their tendency towards art styles or movements. So many things influence the creation of a piece of art. But mainly what this is all about is saying that the time period really influences the creation of a piece of art. Let's watch just the beginning of this video.
Art. It's a word that is associated with a great deal of professions in today's world, and your thoughts as to what it pertains to will vary, as will your feelings towards it. Some choose to admire art, to study it vigorously, to display their talents with glee or reluctance, and others might choose to deny art as being part of their lives. Throughout history, however, art has had a critical role in shaping the modern world as it walks hand in hand with innovation, evolving our knowledge, society, and state of being as we evolved it. Let us begin near the edge of humanity, the Upper Paleolithic Age of man, a time when survival was the primary objective, with art serving this very purpose. Cave drawings were used as a way to recount events and the things that early man had treasured, one such thing being the hunt. While cave drawings had very little form or style to them, they perfectly illustrate how man thought during this era. Take this cave drawing, for instance. The beasts present are drawn dimensionally proportionate because man saw them as vital for his survival, while the human forms are especially flat and thoughtless in nature due to the underdeveloped sense of self of prehistoric man. Moving into the Neolithic era, humans begin to form settlements. Man uses art as a way to honor ancestors and as part of ritual practices, done by way of statues, totems, masks, and effigies. In both of the aforementioned eras, it could be argued that because these illustrations and designs were used as primal survival mechanisms, that they cannot be classified as art. However, it is worth considering that these eras laid the foundation for art as a whole, and thus they are worth mentioning and classifying as art. The Bronze Age saw the dawn of civilizations, with humans creating primal works of art to honor their ancestors.
So just stopping it right there. Humans were honoring their ancestors through the formation of those pieces of art. The narrator also made a comment that the way these animals were depicted in early cave art was based on the philosophical ideas that the artist had of the animals and their reverence to the animals, because they relied on those animals so much for survival. And so they were honoring the animals in the art making, and they were even comparing the animals to themselves, and that influenced the treatment of the subject matter, the treatment of the animals, how the animals were depicted in the art. So you see, that's just an example of how the actual artwork was influenced by those factors of the artist's reality. And isn't it interesting that thousands and thousands of years ago, men and women were making art using animals as subject matter, and they still do today. So, there's a more modern sculpture of a horse. There's a fairly modern painting of horses. And the artist in these two cases chose to depict the horses in two different ways. And, we don't know why, but we know that there would be many reasons. There would be factors that would have been influencing the artists to treat the subject matter in that way. Back up a little bit here. So, as I said earlier, these two paintings we could say they're under the same theme. So this project is all about themes. And the theme I'm suggesting would be humans and the environment. That's the theme, humans and the environment. Now, if we go a little bit deeper though, we can identify the topic. And the topics of these two artworks differ. The theme is the same, but the topics differ. The topic of the artwork on the left is the gold rush. The topic of the artwork on the right is, as you probably guessed, global warming. I find it interesting that these two pieces of art pertain to the same theme, but they certainly have a different message and a different vibe. The one on the left seems very romantic. The colors are warm. Things seem pretty cheery. the men probably are full of hope and expectation that they'll find lots of gold and return to where they came from with great wealth. So the artist is romanticizing that particular experience. The artist on the right, though, is not romanticizing global warming. She actually installed these sculptures during the same time that the World Wildlife Federation was making a public statement on global warming. And so this is a few decades ago when there was lots of research, just being initiated about global warming and the humans' effects on the planet, and a lot of scientific discovery was being shared. I mean, we've heard about this topic and we recognize that this is a very real and serious issue today, but it has been for decades now. But this artist chose to release or to show this sculpture at the time of that scientific discovery release to help make a point, that global warming is a serious thing, and that just like these ice sculptures are melting and eventually will just cease to exist because the water will all evaporate, maybe the artist is suggesting that that is what will happen to us as well if we don't do something about global warming. Maybe our human actions and our disregard for the sensitivity of our planet will eventually lead to our own disappearance and our own demise. So it's a bit of more of a morbid vibe or mood in that piece. But that's what artists use art for, is to make a statement. So that artist is making a strong statement about global warming and how it can have a negative impact on us, which is interesting because we are bringing about global warming, so we are impacting the earth in a negative way, and then of course global warming in turn has an impact on us, a negative impact on us. But anyway, that's a different kind of message than what we see on the left there. That message is well, it's not an earth-shattering or really strong message. It's just maybe just sort of a snapshot in time, a glorification or a romanticism about events that were popular centuries ago, almost like a historical snapshot. Okay, but the point I want you to understand is that these two artists are exploring the same themes, but they're being influenced by, or they're being influenced and motivated by different things. So let's take a look at a few more themes and compare the art from one time period to the art of another time period. So portraiture, that's another theme that has been super common throughout the ages. Here's a portrait of George Washington, the first president of the United States, painted in 1796 by Gilbert Stuart. Now, keep in mind, in the 1700s, there are no cameras. So if people could afford to, they would hire artists to paint portraits of themselves or their loved ones. And then those portraits would, hang in their homes or whatever. So here we have George Washington. It's likely that he commissioned Gilbert Stuart to paint that. And we see George Washington looking very majestic and very important, like he's just, written an important bill, or he's addressing some of his colleagues, senators, who knows, but he looks very dignified, very proud. So that portrait was most likely like for George Washington. Maybe he commissioned the artist to paint it for himself, and he's going to hang that in his own home. Maybe it's the White House. Now look at this portrait here from 2008. So not that long ago. When Barack Obama became the president of the United States of America, he was the first African American or Black president. And that was a big deal because that country has quite a history in terms of the civil rights movement and, discrimination and equality amongst different ethnic groups, especially the Black communities in the United States. And so it was a triumph and a real evolution for the country when they elected a Black president. And so what this artist did is he That's hand painted. So he must have acquired a photo of Barack Obama. He hand painted that. It looks like it might have been done in like a graphics application, but it's hand painted, kind of like stencil style, which is this artist's style. And then he mass distributed that. He made prints of it and mass distributed it all over his community. And why? Well, to spread the message that Barack Obama becoming president was a triumph for the American people, and that now they have a sense of hope that maybe the nation can grow and evolve, that they could finally learn from the past and maybe put issues of discrimination and equality behind them. So in other words, that painting is not really for Barack Obama. Like this one was, I'm suggesting, for George Washington. He had it painted for himself. This one's painted by the artist for the people, for the common people, and the artist is using this piece of art to send the message that this is a great moment for the American people in American history. So you see two different eras. Portraits, same theme, portraiture, and in fact, even topic being the presidency. But in each case, the artist is influenced by and motivated by different things. It's interesting that the medium of this piece is most likely oil paint, because that's what was available at the time. This is most likely done with probably acrylic. So, the evolution of oil to acrylic paint is something in itself. Oil paint is still used today because many artists prefer that medium because of what it can do and just its characteristics. But we didn't always have acrylic paint. But as time went on, with advancements in technology and discoveries in technology, manufacturers were able to create acrylic paint. And not only that, but like I said, this piece of art was able to be printed and mass produced so that many people could see it. At the time that this one was painted, it's likely that only, a select few people saw it because there was only one copy of it, the original. Now with this one, however, there could be many copies of it because of technology now in the 21st century, we can actually mass produce art. This theme is identity. Here's a piece of art from a few hundred years ago. And it shows an Aboriginal man twice. The man on the left is the same man on the right. So what's going on here is that on the left is the before version of the man. Then he journeys to Washington, to DC, to the US Capitol, and you can see a government building in the distance on the left-hand side. Then on the right, you see the man return to his village or to his people, and you see the teepees in the distance there on the far right-hand side. And the idea here is that the man has been changed. So the topic here is assimilation. And so perhaps you've explored that topic in social studies. Usually assimilation has a negative connotation because it usually involves one group of people, like say in this case, white Western European settlers in the newly populated North America. And they are assimilating the First Nations people of North America. So in other words, taking the First Nations people and teaching them to speak a different language, to adhere to different cultural practices, different customs, maybe even live in different geographical areas using different forms of technology, So it's usually, it has a negative connotation because often it's a way that one culture is kind of wiped out, like all of their cultural identity is sort of erased, and the people of that culture assume the new identity of the culture that's doing the assimilating, which is why in this case we see the First Nations man dressed in the European, kind of Western European fashions at the time. So what's the artist saying here? Well, it's a commentary. Maybe the artist is just, again, reminding us of like a sad moment in history, but leaving us to make our own judgments or make our own decisions about, whether that was a good thing or a bad thing. So kind of leaving it open to interpretation, but that's the topic anyway. Now, here's another piece of art that also explores the theme of identity. The topic here is more like how it's not uncommon for people to have ties in two geographical areas. So this is a self-portrait because this was painted by an American artist. She lives in the US now, but she has roots in Africa. And so what we see is we see her here in her American apartment, and she's surrounded by African artifacts that represent her heritage. So some of those artifacts are belongings that belong to her mother and grandmother. Some of them are actual photos of family members. So this is actually a collage. So the photos that you see are real photos. So it's mixed media, I guess you could say, because it's a collage, but then there's also paint on the canvas or the paper, as you can see. It's quite a lovely piece. So in other words, it's like she's making a commentary that she kind of exists in two worlds almost. Like she lives in the US, but she still has, a part of her identity is still back in Africa. And a lot of people that even live here in Red Deer can probably relate to this. Like a lot of our Filipino population still have a lot of family members back in Philippines. And, I constantly am saying goodbye to students for, a few weeks at a time because they go back to Philippines to spend time with their family there, and they actually kind of live there for a few months at a time and then maybe return here to Red Deer. And so they kind of, they have an identity here as Canadian people and Canadian citizens, but they still have an identity back in Philippines. And it's not just Filipino people, but a lot of students can maybe relate to that, because as the years go on here in Canada, we're becoming more and more multicultural, which is wonderful. But this is just a reality for a lot of people, is that they can't just say like, oh yeah, I'm Canadian, I live in Canada. They're a little bit more worldly. Like they have ties, they have parts of their identity from other parts of the world. So that's a identity, but a little bit of a different topic, right? Than this one, which is more of assimilation. Here's another theme: immigration and migration. Here's a painting of a woman who is about to embark on a multi-day journey across the Atlantic Ocean. She's going to go from London to North America, probably land somewhere like Boston or New York. And, she looks like she's probably looking forward to it. So this painting has a positive vibe to it, kind of a romantic vibe or appearance. So, and it was exciting for a lot of those people to journey on large steamships across the Atlantic and explore the New World, or maybe even go across to the New World. The New World is what they used to call it. Go across there and actually start a new life. A lot of people looked forward to that, and that was kind of how North America became populated with like the European descendants. But look at, here's another immigration and migration theme, but the topic here is different. The topic is not like, well, I guess no, I shouldn't say that. The topic is the same because the topic is migration or like displacement or moving from one location, one geographical location to the other. But what we're seeing here is that it's like the artist, I think, is suggesting that a lot of these people look like mainly men. Maybe there's some of them are women, but these people are perhaps refugees, or they've been forced to flee their homeland and live in another geographic location, and now they are destitute. Like, they don't have money, they don't have a home, so they're living on the streets, or they're scrounging for food, looking for work. So it's not as romantic, not as exciting as maybe this painting is depicting this woman's experience to be. The experience of migrating is a little bit more negative for these people. And here's another one that is suggesting like a refugee camp setting. Refugee camps were often managed and organized by military presence, and this painting kind of has that vibe, that there's military presence, and these refugees are recent arrivals at this camp. There's even a boat image in the background suggesting that there's more refugees coming to this refugee camp. So again, why do people go to refugee camps? Well, usually it's because they have to flee their home territory for safety, because there could be civil war, and for their literal safety, like for their lives, the safety of their lives, they have to leave and go live somewhere else. And so in the meantime, usually the middle stopping point are these refugee camps where people live for indefinite periods of time until they can either return to their homeland or maybe find a new place somewhere in the world to live safely. But it's not always a positive experience for these people in these refugee camps, and it's just the reality of our world today, and always has been. Like, so this form of immigration and migration has been around for centuries, but maybe we know a little bit more about it today because of news and media and whatnot. So again, the same theme, but a different approach. So maybe the artist that painted this actually painted it during this time period. That's probably what happened. I don't have a date for this painting, but we can assume it was painted at around the time that people were making that journey from, say, England to North America in a romantic and adventurous type way. But now we have artists who either have experience or have empathy for people who are having to migrate and immigrate against their will, like they're kind of being forced to. And so we have artists who are helping to make the rest of us aware of that, so that maybe we could offer assistance financially, or just offer support, or have empathy for the people that have to go through those negative experiences. Those are a few themes as examples: portraiture, identity, humans and the environment, immigration and migration. Now, that's how you should approach this art project. Step number one, choose a theme that other artists over the centuries have explored, which pretty much means any theme. It's 2021, so a lot's been done already. Humans have been making art for centuries. So you can feel confident that any theme that you can think of has been done before in some capacity, at least in a broad sense, and that you are welcome to do it for your project. After you identify a theme, you must identify a specific topic. Now, the topics are what might be more specific to our current time period. So, for instance, lately a lot of students have been exploring the topic of gender equality. Well, not that that wasn't relevant, say, 1,000 years ago, but it's certainly more common now, a more common topic, most likely because it's talked about more and explored more. And so it's just, on people's minds a little bit more than maybe it was decades ago or centuries ago. So here are many possible themes Now, these are just examples. There's many more that you could explore, but these are some of the, most common themes. And this is quite a broad range. So this really encompasses a lot of art making that's happened so far, in the years since humans have been making art. But again, the idea is to identify a specific topic after choosing a theme. So here's an example. The theme of this piece, we could say, is heroes. But maybe the topic is that even heroes, even though they sometimes seem larger than life, even heroes have basic needs that everybody shares, like the need for transportation. Other basic needs would be like the need for shelter, for clothing, for food. This is a piece of art that was created a few years ago by a student here at St. Joseph High School. And it's mixed media. The student she actually came up with the concept on her phone, believe it or not, with an app. And then I helped her learn how to use Photoshop. So she found and cut out those portraits, the heads, in Photoshop. And then the rest of the setting, the subway setting, was built from scratch digitally in Adobe Illustrator. So this student had fun learning how to use two applications from Adobe that she'd never used before. And I think what she's saying here is that, like, these four men, they're considered to be heroes worldwide, but especially for the American people. I mean, and they're all African-American men, but they come from different walks of life and kind of different cultural areas or social areas. Like we have Muhammad Ali, who was a famous boxer, but also an advocate for civil rights and kind of a spokesperson for athletes. And then we've got Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr., also advocates for civil rights and very influential male leaders. And then Jimi Hendrix there, sitting with the wild hair, who was very influential in terms of rock music, especially for guitarists. But, maybe one of the first African-American men to really be an influence in rock and roll music or in pop culture at a time when the industry was maybe dominated by, white or Anglo-European men and women. And so even till this day, Jimi Hendrix is considered kind of a guitar or a rock icon. And, maybe not necessarily for his ethnicity, but more for the contributions he made to music. So anyway, I think what this artist is saying here is that even though these men are all like kind of bigger than life, heroes, or they were, and they still are, but they had like common needs just like the common person has, like transportation, the need to get around. And so here they all are riding on the subway, which is, it's kind of neat to think about that sometimes we forget that these people that are famous or in pop culture, they have the same needs as the rest of us, right? Medical needs for food, shelter, clothing, basic transportation. So yeah, that's just an example. And now what the other thing I love about this piece is that when you're working on this project, what's supposed to happen is that you pick a theme that another artist has explored throughout the ages, or many artists, but you allow your current situation to influence your art making, just like all these other artists did. So when this student did this piece of art, what influenced it? Well, the fact that she had a cell phone and, she knew how to use it. She was proficient with this particular app and she was interested in working digitally. And then she had access to the Adobe applications because we have them here at school, or we have them in our school division. So, they were accessible. So it was an option. She could work digitally. And so she chose to. And, what made her choose these four men or this theme? Honestly, I don't even remember. Maybe it was because she was learning about them in social studies, or she read a book about them, or she saw a movie about them. Who knows? But those are just some of the influences that led to the creation of this piece of art. So that's what I want you to consider. I want you to consider all the variables that are going to influence your art making. You know, your age, whether you're a boy or girl, where you live, what your life experiences have been, what kind of relationships you are in right now, what your background is with technology, and what your comfort level is with certain artistic media, what kind of materials you like using. It could even be like what materials are available to you at home right now, or here at school. So those are the things that are supposed to influence you, and also the time period. It's 2021, so it's likely that you're going to explore a topic that is current, or you'll explore it in a way that's modern. So going back to the very first slide we looked at, so we have the same theme here, but not that global warming wasn't around hundreds of years ago. It certainly was, but we just really didn't know about it, right? And so the artist of the painting on the left chose to explore the topic of the gold rush, whereas the artist on the right is choosing to use her art to make a commentary on a more contemporary topic, global warming or the environment. So you got to keep that in mind too, right? Like what year it is. Watch this video again if you need a better understanding of some of the topics, or perhaps you want to examine some of the artwork again and think about how the artist communicated his or her idea through that particular piece of art. Email me if you have questions or you want to explore some ideas. Maybe you have an idea for a theme and a particular topic, but you're not exactly sure if it works, or you need some guidance as to how you could go about exploring it. Just reach out to me, and I'm here to help. Have fun with this project. It's very wide open. You can work in any style, so you'll have to consider the general style you're going to work in, the treatment of the subject matter, the media that you're going to use. So it's very wide open, so you have a lot of freedom to really explore and be creative. So have fun with that.